So speaking of metadata, this is where we take a cue from our journalist friends and talk about the 5W's and 1H. So you have an idea to create something. You're wanting to create, like in this case, an app, or maybe in your work you're wanting to create an infographic, etc. So you find the data that you need to be able to produce what you want to produce, but how do you know if you can use it or if you should use it? Is the quality something that you feel comfortable with using as the core of your product? Is the data in a format that you can use without too much extra processing? Is the scope of it appropriate for what you're trying to accomplish? You will be more comfortable and confident in using open data if you know how to answer these kind of questions about any data that you encounter. And getting you comfortable and confident is what we're about here. So starting off, who made the data open? You of course want to know who's behind a given data set and make your own determination as to whether or not that source is going to be credible. As our example with Johns Hopkins, shows, the data owner and the person or people who make the data open may not always be the same people. So you do want to be aware of kind of this chain of custody of what you're working with. And this is why attributing sources actually in derivative works is pretty important. So you want to know that the entity making the data open had the right to do so if the information that they were, was not open to begin with. So what is the source of the data? So we can consider, for example, whether or not some data is machine generated, generated by sensors versus something that's collected by citizen scientists, or crowdsourced. Some data sets have more robust QA, quality assurance, and controls in place than others. And so knowing if you're looking at sensor data or satellite data will help you find clues about some of the features and bugs, because all data sets have their quirks, that you're going to encounter. So, something like missing values in a crowdsourced data might be an issue, depending on the quality assurance in place. So you also, by knowing how the data was generated, you can find examples of how scientists or how other people deal with the particular, the idiosyncrasies of that type of data. What data formats are available to you? We talked about open data being technically open, being machine readable. So depending on what you plan to do with the data and the volume of the data, you may not need to or want to access it programmatically, such as via an API, which is Application Programming Interface, a static comma-separated text file, CSV, or an Excel file might be just fine for you. So what is the source of the data? What data formats are available? And now we can talk about when. This third W reminds us to pay attention to the temporal features of a data set we're looking at. In my experience, time always comes into play in several ways when you're dealing with data. So, you of course want to know when the data was published. A lot of times you're looking, you care about recency, but maybe not. Also, when was the data last updated? What time periods are available? Are you looking at weekly data? Is this daily data? Is it something that a machine generated by the hour or by seconds? So these are kind of a set of features around time that you would want to look for. So where was the data collected? Where data is collected geographically also provides some important context as you're getting to know a data set that you may or may not want to use. So a log of outdoor temperatures, for example. So a log of outdoor temperatures over time doesn't mean much without a location, right? And the same numbers can mean different things depending on the location. So it's possible, as you will see overwhelmingly if your space app is going to use Earth science data, that the location is actually important data in and of itself. We talked about GPS earlier, and thanks to the breakthrough in open data, that GPS represents, so much of the data that we can access has location information or coordinates associated with it. So this is another dimension of an open data set that you may want to be aware of as we are familiarizing ourselves with a given data set. So the fifth W is why. This is less technical, but worth knowing, especially in the case of research data. The focus of a study that produces data tells you something about the question that the researcher or institution was trying to answer. And that can give you clues about whether or not it's relevant to your project. It can factor into trust. And sometimes a data portal will include a statement about why they have made their data open that can give you clues about, a direction about what they're intending to have done with the data. And, the why may also show up in just, the mission statement of the organization releasing the data. So here's our +1. The how question. This ties us back to the licensing issue that we already talked about. If provided, the license will give you some clear indication of how you can use the info. Access is an important aspect of data being technically open, and it's one of the things you'll want to quickly find out. You want to find out whether or not you can access the information that's in a way that's helpful to you. So not all open data has a way to access it dynamically or programmatically. So